How's it going? This is Joe and Tell. Today I want to do something a little bit different, and I want to see what we can do using a sub to actually fix the bass or reduce the bass. I know a lot of times folks want to add a subwoofer to add more bass, and we will do that as well. But in this case, I'll show you why it might be useful to use a sub like this Trevoce 12 EQ DSP in order to reduce the bass. So first off, I want to say that OSD is a channel sponsor. The agreement is that they send me stuff to review, and that's what I do. And so they sent me a few things, and kind of exciting. They have a new MB5 passive speaker that I'm using here, as well as a Trevoce 12 EQ DSP, which is a little bit different from their previous one. I plan on doing a review of the MB5s and an active version called the AB5s in the near future. They also sent me their Nero XD2 wireless amplifier that also has Bluetooth, so we'll be using that today. So the thing to note is that the amplifier I'm using does not have DSP built into it to allow me to do stuff to the main speakers, but the subwoofer does. Not only does the subwoofer have a new TI chip, which means that it's DSP corrected prior, but it also has an iWoofer app that allows me to do DSP corrections post. Now this is a system that I set up here in my wife's office. It's definitely not a serious listening area. It's just something where we throw on things on the TV for our kids to watch. One cool thing I noticed about this Nero XD2, just functionality wise, is it does use Bluetooth. I'm using a $20–$30 Android TV on here that does allow it to connect via Bluetooth. So we actually have a wireless connection from the streaming device to this amplifier, which is kind of handy. It also has a remote, so very cool way to get better sound on your TV. So here I have a laptop and an iPad. I'll be using both of them for the purpose of this demo, but this can be used for anything, even if you're not using OSD products, if you're using a subwoofer with its own DSP, or if you're using something like the mini DSP, you can do something like this as well. So looking at the frequency response of the speaker, this is the MB5, and you'll see that this is a pretty good response. We have this bump here, and that's at the crossover point. Let's ignore that for a second, but overall, you know, you have some pretty healthy bass and then a downward sloping response slightly. And so that's a pretty good response. This is something that I did in the garage, kind of away from most of the walls to try to reduce any interference from the walls. I should mention that these speakers, I think they said they're gonna be 199 bucks a pair. So this is a pretty good response for speakers that are this inexpensive. So I'm happy to promote speakers that are inexpensive that have a pretty good response. I'm excited about products that are inexpensive because it gives people who are new to this hobby a chance to play with something and just learn. So let's see what happens when we put these speakers in a room. Now, some of the requirements were that the speakers were not out in the middle of the room. This is not my room. And so they had to be up against the wall. That's a bad thing because you're gonna get bass reinforcement. This is a fact that when you put a speaker near a wall, you get more bass, especially if you put it near a corner. Now you have two walls that it's near. If it's near a floor, that's another wall. The other issue is that where we're usually sitting when we're watching this is also near a wall. Now we have two issues. We have the speaker near a wall and our listening position is also near a wall. I've placed the mic there to kind of simulate us sitting there to give you an idea what happens when we take this MB5 speaker, which has a very nice response, and we just put it in this position. So you're looking at the frequency response, and it went from this kind of smooth, nice thing to this more jagged looking response. But the most noticeable thing is right here below 100 Hertz. Look at this big bump that's centered around 50 Hertz. That is big. That's a big bump and definitely audible. And what it ends up sounding like is, at first you might be impressed, like, oh man, these speakers have a lot of bass. But then later on you discover, that's a little too much bass. It's boomy bass. It's not accurate, it's not flat, it's not smooth. And so you wanna fix that. Now, one way to fix that is if you have DSP correction, you can kind of smooth this out within your room. But like I'm saying, this amplifier does not have that. So let's take a quick look at this. This is the Trevoce 12 EQ DSP subwoofer. And as you can tell, this is also near the same wall. which means that it also has that same issue that the speakers are having, but even worse because it has more bass. So you can see same bump here at around 50 hertz. But the good thing about this is it does extend out further, right? Which we do want. We want the subwoofer to kind of add a little bit more of that deep bass extension, but we don't want it to add more problematic bass. So this is what's interesting. With DSP, you can actually use the subwoofer to do both. You can use it to offset this 50 hertz bump, and you can actually still use it to extend the bass out further. Interesting. So let me quickly show you the target curve. This is the curve that we typically want in room. This is just generally speaking. It depends on the room and it depends on the distance you are from the speakers and also personal preference. But this pink line that we're looking at here is kind of what we want from a speaker. So let's kind of take some of these away. So if we take a look at the way that the MB5 is measuring in the room, you can see it's kind of following this pink trace to some extent. You know, we have some issues here and things that are going on here, but for the most part, you see the trend, except for this, now it starts deviating way too much. Let me just show you a quick after of what happened after I tuned this system and made some adjustments. And I'll do this on the fly so you can see it happening in real time. But this is before and this is after. Isn't that crazy? So I actually use the subwoofer to augment the sound and get the sound to sound more similar to this target response, which is what we wanted. Right now, let's go ahead and run the real-time analyzer. I'm gonna run some pink noise. Basically what this is gonna do is it's gonna play sound that's equal energy in all the frequencies, and we're gonna see what the mic is picking up. Ideally, it should be a flat line, but as you've seen here, it definitely isn't because of imperfections in the room, speakers, etc. You're gonna see my voice here kind of making stuff happen around 400 and 500 hertz, but if I am quiet, that should stop. We're not gonna look at that anyway. We're gonna look right here around 48 hertz, okay? This peak is what we're trying to fix and see if it's possible. I'm gonna be quiet for a second. And now I'm gonna go ahead and turn up the subwoofer to a decent level, kind of try to match them up a little bit, so. Okay, maybe somewhere around there. You see I'm getting a little bit more extension, and this is following the line here, which is what I want. But the other issue that you'll see is around 49 hertz. This seemed to make the bump even worse here. But watch what happens when we play with the delay. So the delay of the speaker, or timing depending on what you're using, can actually affect the phase relationship. So let's go ahead and move this a little bit and watch what happens here at 48 hertz. Also listen for the change in sound, okay? So isn't that interesting? By adjusting the delay, the sub is actually canceling the frequencies at 48 hertz. So I'm not even touching the parametric EQ settings, which gives you some more fine adjustment. This is just playing with the phase. And as you can tell by that quick tune, it wasn't as good as what I had before, where I really got to play with parametric EQ, things like that. So play with these settings. The main takeaway from this is that you can actually use a subwoofer to reduce the bass in some frequencies while still extending the bass response. So for example, let's take away the DSP tune that I did prior, which I spent realistically a couple hours on. But let's take this one that I spent very little time on, compare it to the target curve. Not great around here, but that's what you would fix using the parametric EQ, but that would take a little bit longer. Comparing this to the speaker just by itself, you remember that we had this bump here, which we kind of exchanged for this bump here. Again, we can fix that with more tuning, and that is shown here with my previous tune, which is much smoother than the one that I have now. The difference you're seeing above here is because I was playing 2 speakers before versus 1 this time, just to keep things a little bit more simple. But if we take a look at just the bass frequencies, you can see what happened is in the original one, the red, we had this bump here and this dip here, and we were able to smooth it out. In the green is what we're looking for, but we have this bump here and here. Now with more advanced parametric EQ and with more advanced tools like Dirac, which allows you to change the phase at various frequencies, you can actually smooth the rest out pretty well. So just for fun, I'm gonna do exactly what I did now, but using a mini DSP DDRC88A that retails for $1,148. The way it's configured right now, it's for 8 channels. So this is gonna be overkill for the 2.1 channel system that I'm using right now, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea of why I'm so pumped about Dirac. You always hear me talking about it, and you'll see why. So if you're interested in doing this for like a 2.1 channel system, I'd recommend getting something like the mini DSP DDRC24. That retails currently for $449, and it also has Dirac. So if you don't want to use Dirac, you want to get your hands dirty and get in there a little bit, then you can get something just like the mini DSP 2x4 HD that retails for $225. Just keep in mind that Dirac is an automatic room correction system, whereas these other methods require to use something like REW, take your own measurements, and then figure out the corrections that you think you should make. And so that's the main difference. All right, so I just ran Dirac. Let's go ahead and do a quick test and see how this measures. So remember that this green line is the target response. This is the ideal response. So this is what I was able to get with my tune after a few hours, and this is what I got with Dirac just after, I don't know, 10 minutes or so in red. There you go. So I'd say the Dirac one looks better to me. Smoother overall. Yeah, it fixes some of these issues in the purple here. Yep, that's what you pay for. So it also fixes this bump here, which is a major issue. Fixes this and this dip here and this extra energy up here. So of course I gotta listen to this and see how it sounds, and I'll tell you after the video. So anyway, I'll leave a link down below to some of the products that I showed here. If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I upload new videos. Take care, bye-bye. See, what they can do on here is they can apply phase corrections throughout the entire frequency range, and they have a very accurate way of doing channel balance. All right, Dirac, you win.